enjoying their afternoons and their lunches, and thank you for taking the time to join me today. I am the co-director of the Bronfman Youth Fellowships, and in my role I've had the privilege of working with and expanding on a community of over 1,000 young Jews from North America and Israel. Just to give a quick plug, the program begins at age 17 for high school juniors. So for those of you that are working with that age population or have alumni in that age population, I encourage you to take a look at our website, bronfman.org, and consider encouraging individuals to apply. Our application process starts soon after the Chagim. I am a day school graduate myself, and I also consider myself an alumna of many other wonderful programs in the Jewish community. And I think that for many of us, there are more than one association that we have with alumni communities or programs that have been meaningful to us educationally or otherwise. And one of the things for you as professionals, and that we're going to spend some time on today, is trying to understand and think about what is the specific place within your relationship to those alumni where there's an affinity, where there's a connection point between what your program or school offers and what they value in their lives or an experience that they've had with your program that you can build on. So this webinar in many ways builds on the first webinar on alumni engagement strategy. We're going to do a very quick recap on what does it mean to have an alumni engagement strategy, but much of what we're going to talk about today is around tactics and tools for alumni engagement, including the question of what do we actually mean by tactics and tools, and how is that different from a strategy, which is not always as clear as it might seem. So before we move on to the next slide, I'd like to ask everyone to take a look. I'm about to post a poll question. And this first question, which Mark is going to post, is a statement and getting a bit of an answer from you on this statement. So the statement is, starting a Facebook group was one of the first things we did to connect with alumni. And it'd be great to see what people's responses are to this question. So it's fun to see real-time responses here. We'll give it one moment. Okay, so we have about 71% of you who've responded so far, and it's continuing to grow, but I'm going to jump in and say that most, or a large portion of you, 43% of you, have responded and said that it was one of the first things you did. Building a Facebook group was one of the first things you did. And then for those of you who answered some of the other answers here, 26% says no, but we did create one later, and 22% say you don't currently have a Facebook group. Probably by the end of this webinar, all of you will be thinking about what that means a little bit differently. So maybe I just set you up here, but the first myth or the first point that I want us to tackle today is this myth of Facebook is going to solve all our alumni engagement needs. And it's not incorrect to think that Facebook is one of the mechanisms for engaging and connecting with alumni, because it very much is. But technology can help us, but it's not going to do all the work for us. It is not a strategy. And in that way, if we're not clear on our priorities, if we're not clear on what we're trying to achieve and who we're trying to reach, what tends to happen, and what I've seen happen for many organizations, is we amass a lot of names who quickly join a group with a sense of something building from there, but then we often don't know what to do next, and the participants themselves end up disengaged, even further disengaged. A really interesting little story. I was talking to an individual who runs a very successful Jewish summer camp, and they told me about this amazing event that they coordinated about a year and a half ago, where their goal was to reach as many alumni as they could, and they hosted this event in a beautiful, really cool location, and they armed many different alumni from different years to seek out and find people, and they actually got the names of and contact info of 700 alumni who they had not been in touch with in years, and they had hundreds of people who showed up at this event. And this individual told me that afterwards they didn't know what to do with all these names and numbers, in the sense that they didn't really have a plan for what's next or what they were going to do, other than some of the more basic things like sending those individuals a newsletter and some of what I would refer to as kind of push communications, where there's no further pull from the end of the alumni. And that's what we're going to work to avoid in this webinar. We're going to try and help you not end up in that place, although certainly it would be fun and wonderful if you got 700 names, as long as you have something to do with them. So just to recap, and again, I really would encourage you to take a look at the first webinar, which you can find on the Jewish Day School Video Academy website, so you can build on what's here. But really, the recipe for alumni engagement success is very much about having a strategy. And a strategy does not need to be super duper complex. A strategy in many ways is answering a set of questions for yourself. And the questions that I would recommend you think about, and I am sure many of you have already, is who are your alumni? What are you trying to achieve? When are your alumni most receptive to engagement? Why do your alumni matter to your school? And how can you meaningfully connect to them? In an alumni strategy, a successful one, it's about relationships. And so understanding what the answers to these questions are is really key here. So having a simple strategy is going to allow you to also identify some specific goals that are going to allow you then to measure your success, to know if you're accomplishing what you're setting out to accomplish. And I want to share, I had a great conversation recently with a professional at a school in Toronto, and we were talking about what their overall goals are for the school. And one of their reach goals, which is probably very, very possible in the next few years, is that they will end up having a waiting list for their admissions. And we talked about how can that goal link to and be the goal for alumni engagement as well. In what way can an alumni engagement strategy allow them to get to that overall goal that helps build the school even further? And in that way, the answer of why their alumni matter to their school very much has to do with the way that their alumni can be connectors and resources for getting them to a place where they'll have a waiting list for admissions. So that's just one example, but it's extremely valuable to have that one-pager even of answers to these questions. And when you get to the question of how are you going to engage your alumni, that's where the tactics or the tools come into place. So we're going to spend some time looking at how do you use a database, or why should you use a database, some social media, Facebook and LinkedIn being two of them, events and networking, content creation, which means newsletters and other sorts of written materials, and fundraising. Now, for those of you that were on the first webinar, you may remember that my absolute #1 message there was the idea that alumni engagement is not about fundraising. It is about relationships. This is still true, but in reality, people do want to connect to something that's meaningful to them and something where they feel that they can make a difference in. And in that sense, fundraising is a piece of your toolkit when it comes to alumni engagement, or can be a piece of your toolkit at the right moments and at the right time. And we'll look at that a little bit. So moving on, an important first step, when you have your strategy, you want to make sure that you keep your stakeholders on the same page. In order for you to be successful as a professional and as a school or an organization, it's really key that there's clarity for everyone as to what you're trying to achieve and who's contributing to that. So listed here are some of the possible stakeholders. Your board, your funders, your donors, your school administration, your faculty and staff, and your engaged alumni. I had a conversation with someone who said that they were told they need to build an alumni engagement strategy by their board, and that their board had an expectation that by the end of the next year, every single alumnus would be donating $18 a year to the school, or even $18 a month. Now, for most of you on this call, you can imagine right off the bat that that's pretty much an unrealistic expectation. But what I understand about that expectation that that board member stated is that they didn't have any other vision for what alumni engagement could achieve for the school. So their expectations were based on the rubric by which they were judging what it could mean to be part of an alumni engagement process. And so giving your stakeholders access to your strategy, giving them a one-page document that says, here are what we're trying to achieve, here's why we're trying to achieve it, here are the tools we're going to use to achieve it, and here are some of the ways we're going to measure that success. That's going to help manage that expectation and keep it realistic. The other thing to note about that is that you'll have more champions in that way. And you'll also be able, ideally, to utilize many of those stakeholders in your engagement process. If your alumni engagement strategy falls solely to one or two professionals or one department at your school, for example, your development team or a part-time alumni engagement coordinator, it's probably going to fail, at least to some degree. But if that person who is managing your strategy or team or professional department is managing that strategy has a clear list of ways that different stakeholders can help contribute to that strategy, whether it's everything from a simple method for engaged alumni to let you know when they've gotten back in touch with another alumnus, or whether it's a way that a board member, when they are in a specific city, can take out some of the recent alumni who are in college in that city for a coffee and a chance to connect. Those are things that then help everyone feel bought into the process and the project and really strengthen what you're trying to achieve. The next step for you is knowing who your alumni are. Your alumni are your stakeholders as well, and there's a lot of information that is out there pretty easily around who they are and what they're looking for in their lives. And when you're thinking about why you want to engage them, one of the things you need to really understand, and this goes back again to the first webinar in many ways, is you want to be able to meet them in a place where they're seeking something as well. Otherwise, it's a one-way conversation, and there's not a lot that you can do with a one-way conversation. So there are some techniques, focus groups and surveys, utilizing class representatives and other networking events and tools. There's also a lot of information online, whether it's through something like LinkedIn or Facebook and profiles that people keep, or it's through individuals' bios if they are working somewhere that are easily Googleable. And also your own database is a way for you to capture and parse your data in ways that are helpful to understanding who your alumni are. This is going to inform your strategy and also help you to identify the tactics. I'll give an example. We, in 2008, at the Bronfman Fellowships, did an alumni survey. And one of the more simple questions that we asked on that survey was whether alumni had accounts in a very large range of different social media outlets. Funny enough, some of those outlets from 2008 don't even exist anymore. But one of the ones on there was Facebook. Another was LinkedIn. We had some presumptions. We assumed that our older alumni would be on LinkedIn for professional reasons. We had some assumptions that our older alumni would not be on Facebook. We thought that that was where our college-age folks would be. What we found was that the largest portion, I forget the exact statistic, but it was over 70%, were all on Facebook. So whether they were in their 40s or whether they were younger, they were on Facebook. We also found, interestingly, that our college age and even high school age were on LinkedIn because they had been tuned into the idea that that was something important for them, whether they're looking for internships or other mentoring opportunities. So simple surveys can help you determine which tools or tactics are going to be most useful to you. So our next slide and our next point that I wanted to emphasize here is something pretty simple, which is just you're not going to catch all the fish in the sea. the goal can't be solely about numbers. It's great if you can find 700 people and you actually know what you want to do with all 700 people, but that may not be so helpful to you. And in particular, for a lot of schools that I've spoken with where they have a history of 50 years or more, it's often very difficult to find people who have had no contact with the school for 20, 30, 40 years. And it's probably not going to get you the results you're looking for anyways, whether those results have to do with skill-based volunteerism, whether those results have to do with fundraising. It's really important for you to target the populations that you're most excited about connecting to and where there's the most overlap with the goals you have for your school's engagement process and what they're looking for in their lives. So it's okay to focus on specific populations. And in your efforts on the information I shared on the previous slide around knowing who your alumni are, you also can use your common sense as a school and as professionals as to what are alumni asking for and what can you actually provide to them. There are often alumni who say they would love weekly catch-ups for all alumni to network and do Jewish learning together. But many of those same individuals wouldn't really be able to come in practice. This is one of the funnier things. I'm not a Facebook expert, I'm going to say that right now, but one of the funnier things that I've learned about Facebook is Facebook events, and some people on this call may be familiar with this. But it took me a while. When you create an event on Facebook, a lot of people RSVP on Facebook, and yet they're in Hawaii or they're in California, and I'm in New York, and the event is in New York, and it's just a small gathering, and I'm thinking, what does it mean that they've RSVP'd? And what I started to understand, and some people have helped me understand, is that what they're trying to indicate is, this is great, this is wonderful, this is cool that this is happening, and I'm trying to indicate that in a virtual sense I'm RSVPing with my heart, so to speak, but I'm not actually coming. And in the same way, what's often the case is that alumni will let you know that they would love for you to do a very vast range of activities on the calendar, but in reality they don't have the time to be part of all of those. And so being really targeted about which type of activities and for whom is going to give you the best bang for your buck and for your energy. And certainly when you are targeting, you still want to have some general approaches for alumni engagement that allow for the door to stay open. You just never know who is going to wake up, and literally sometimes it's like this. In the Bronfman Fellowships, something we've seen time and time again is alumni may go abroad or be very, very focused on their careers for several years, and then something happens in their life, there's a change in their life. Maybe they've moved back to somewhere that they feel connecting to this community would be of value to them. Or maybe they've had a child recently and they're taking stock in what's important to them and places that have been meaningful to them. And what we find is that they come back to this community. And similarly for your school and your organization, that can very much be the case. So you do want to have some strategies that keep things open and not too narrow. Things like your newsletters, some of your major events that you're inviting alumni to, clarity about ways that you're looking to engage alumni, whether it's skill-based volunteerism or mentorship opportunities, so that people who want to step in and access that can. But having said all of that, it's nice to have some focus. So, two natural populations that I want to share with you as places where it's probably useful for you to consider focusing are recent graduates and college students, and we'll talk a bit about that, and alumni who live nearby. At this point, I want to ask us to do another poll question just to give us all a sense of where folks who are on the call are thinking. And the question is, do you know how many alumni still live in your city? And let's take a moment to see what the answer is as I switch to the next slide. So we're going to come back to the answer. It's great. I see a lot of people have voted so far. But we're going to first start with looking at our college population, our recent grads. So, of course, one of the things that's really important to keep in mind is you can never start too early in messaging what it means to be an alumnus, particularly for schools where students graduate in 6th grade or younger. There are many other encounters they're going to have with other networks and other schools and other educational frameworks. And so the more that you're able to build in from the time they're young, role models for them of what it looks like to be an alumnus coming back to the school. And again, this is something that we spent more time on in the first webinar. And the more that once they are alumni, once they have graduated and left your doors officially, the more that you're able to bring them back in certain ways, the better and more likely it is that you're going to have a long-term relationship with them. So just a few quick ideas to get you started, and I'm sure some of you have some good examples of what you do with your recent graduates and college students. And certainly if anyone wants to type in a little chat into the message, Mark can let us know if some fun tips come through, because it's always important for information sharing to happen between those of you who are part of this conversation as well. And so bringing your students to them, when these recent graduates are in a high school or in college, they are often very eager to host and share what they're doing with current students who are contemplating their next steps. Right away, you're helping them be role models. You're helping them be the type of people who are opening their doors to others and to feeling as though they're part of a community in that sense. That's really that give and take of community. Similarly, inviting them to come back and speak and share their stories, or to write pieces that can be shared in the school newsletter, or on the Facebook group, or other places where you can hear from them. You can bring the school to them. I mentioned earlier suggesting to board members or other individuals that if they're in a city or town, can they catch up with and meet with recent graduates or graduates in general, alumni in general, especially with some of your beloved teachers, where you may have individuals from your school that have a long track record and relationships with students. It might be nice to find an opportunity to bring them to a few key campuses, or again, key cities where you know you have alumni who would be excited to come out and see Rabbi so-and-so or Mrs. so-and-so. And that is really an effective way of connecting them. I also want to say one thing on that, which is a lot of individuals in schools, there's turnover in schools. There's culture change that happens in schools. And often the bridge, the individuals that are the bridges, are some of those beloved teachers or administrators. And those individuals help really help your recent graduates and older graduates to understand that the school is still a place where they belong. And even for those who are retirees, there's an element of bringing those individuals back as valued emeritus educators, allows them to, in some senses, endorse your program or your school, that they are still connected to it in some way. Bring networks to those young graduates and recent graduates, internship opportunities, mentorship opportunities. Something that we've done for the past several years that has been very simple and very successful is compiling a list of college study and summer programs and sending it out to our college-age students. And where we know that there's an alumnus who has recently been part of that program or attended that program, noting that so that those students know there's an actual person they can talk to hear about the project or organization and make their own decision if it's somewhere they would want to participate. And lastly, bring them back to the school. I still have a very fond memory of getting to be a substitute teacher in kindergarten at my Jewish day school when I came home one year over Christmas break from college. And it was just very invigorating to be connected to those young people. That was a meaningful thing for me. There's also opportunities for volunteering and speaking back at the school. And in particular, if you have a development office or if you have an alumni coordinator of some sort at your school, getting alumni to come back and help you with the process of that work in particular is a nice one. So I see one question that's come through, and I want to address it shortly, and I just want to note the question, which is one of our issues is that as a K-8 school, it's hard to keep track of our alumni when they leave so young, and that makes a lot of sense. Again, some of these tactics here can really start with high school age individuals, ninth graders. The sooner the better in that sense. And we'll talk a little bit more as we go about also how do you use social networks. If you are in touch with even just one or two individuals from a grade, how can they be resources to you to stay connected to others? And what messages or what experiences are of interest to those younger individuals as well? Now, alumni who live nearby, back to our poll question. So very, very happy to see that 58% of you say that you have a good sense of the number of your alumni that live nearby. Now, I should have asked a second question, but you'll think about this for yourselves, which is for some of you that good sense might be, hey, there's a lot of alumni that still live nearby, and for some of you it's going to be, unfortunately, we have almost no alumni who live nearby. For those that fall into the second category, I want to say that all hope is not lost, because many of those alumni may still have parents or other relatives that live nearby. And to the extent that that then helps with your recruiting efforts, or those individuals may still feel a sense of connection and investment in their local community. I met someone recently, it was about a year ago actually, but I met somebody who lives in New York City and started a wonderful little mini nonprofit almost to help their local community in the Midwest, their local Jewish community, continue to be a vibrant Jewish place. This is someone in their 20s, and they have a whole group of other people who are New York transplants because of professional reasons, but who really believe that the place they grew up is a place that I suppose they hope one day they might bring their children back to. And so there's not a disconnect 100%. Having said that, for those of you where you have a larger number of alumni who are still living nearby, that's a population that you're probably going to be able to see a lot of benefit from staying connected to them in not just a virtual way, but also in a face-to-face way. And some of the ways that you might do that include things like inviting them back to speak at the school, or inviting them for a series of sessions led by your professionals, whether it's some learning sessions, if it's Jewish content, or whether it's, I had a great conversation with a school in LA that has upgraded significantly their technology, and they are a really tech savvy school. All the kids have iPads and all these wonderful things, and they have some tech specialists that work at the school. And we talked about what would happen if they had an alumni event where the tech specialists were sharing some best practices that not only work at the school, but are interesting and of benefit to alumni in their professional lives, as a way to bring back individuals into the school building itself and help them to see the brand of the school, to use that kind of corporate language, but to help them to see the way that the school has continued to grow and evolve. Your alumni who live nearby are probably your best bet when it comes to networking, when it comes to your recruitment of future students, both because they themselves may want to send their own children there, or because the word of mouth that they can provide is so local and so helpful in that way. And that's why, to the extent that they can understand the school, not as a time capsule that has stayed the same for the past 20 years, but as an evolving place, you're going to find a lot of benefit out of that. So, moving forward, this portion of our session, in some ways I want to put a tiny disclaimer to it, which is simply to say that much of my work on a regular basis in alumni engagement uses technology, but does not use technology to the greatest extent that I know some of you yourselves do already. And so this is not my 100% expertise, but I think it's something that even for a novice like me, there are simple things you can do with technology. And in particular, because I'm a novice in that way, I hope that that'll ease some of your fears. I feel like the best math teachers are the ones that don't consider themselves that good at math. Well, they better be good enough, right? But not math whizzes who don't get it when the kid at the back of the classroom doesn't understand. So maybe I'll be that sort of teacher here, or something of that sort. So first I wanted to share with you 5 things you should know about a set of tactics, a set of tools that are really helpful in alumni engagement. The first one I want to tackle is databases. I think a lot of you probably use some sort of database And in many cases, I'm guessing that the database is either mostly composed of current students and families and/or is used for your fundraising efforts. That's great in both counts. One of the most important things to note is a database simply needs to be a place where everyone in your professional network and your stakeholders that you want to engage in this process can find easily information about members of your community, can find contact information about members of your community. And in particular, this is the nice thing about certain databases. For example, Salesforce, which the Bronfman Fellowships uses, and we, as a nonprofit, have licenses that are free through Salesforce. So it's something you may want to look into if your school is eligible or your program is eligible. Salesforce also allows for many individuals on a team to note contact points they've had with a specific individual, which means that if I'm calling an alumnus, I can take a peek and I can see if one of my colleagues has also spoken to them recently, or if that alum has attended an event in the past year, or if they served as a mentor for another alum. And that thickens the type of content and conversation that I can have with them. It also helps us to essentially map who the relationships are and who holds the relationships with different individuals, which again is very powerful. But when you're working with databases, don't obsess about amassing data. Again, it's not about how many names you have. It's about how deep and how targeted you are in what you want to know about individuals. Have a system and a point person for updating those details, and make sure it's clear. Don't just hope that people will work with the database. Make sure that there's at least someone who's monitoring that the database is up to date and contact info is correct. When we get a LinkedIn notification about an alum who switched jobs, there's a person on our staff who immediately goes into action and updates that information in our Salesforce database. It saves those of us on staff the time from having to all assume or no one to take care of something of that sort, and therefore the information wouldn't get updated. And it also means that people feel empowered around the work that they're focused on doing when it comes to their piece of the puzzle for alumni engagement. And you can find information to put into that database in a lot of different ways. We have a yearly magazine that we send to our alumni, and sometimes I think that one of the most important pieces of that magazine is the fact that when we get those return magazines back for people who have moved, who haven't updated us on their contact info, it gives us an opportunity to reconnect with them, and reconnect and not simply say, we'd like to get in touch with you so that we can bother you, not that that's what we would do, but rather we'd like to get in touch with you because we have this wonderful magazine that we don't want you to miss out on. And the amazing thing every year is I see many, many alumni who respond and say, oh my goodness, here's my new info, and you get some extra information that's helpful. And also solicit your alumni themselves and your teachers and your former teachers to help you really make sure that the data is rich and accurate. And where there are opportunities to incentivize that, depending on the size of your school, or to incentivize it when it comes to former teachers who are involved but who are not on the payroll anymore, thinking about ways that you can encourage them to let you know. And I'll tell you, sometimes on our case, we have a whole cadre of faculty who work in other organizations during the year and who we're lucky enough to have as educators during the summer. So they're busy people, but the fact that they know that if they catch up with one of our alumni and they let us know what's happening with that, sometimes if that entailed going out for a coffee, we can help reimburse something small like that. And we're talking $5, and it's not a lot of time, but it's something small that encourages them to let us know when they have heard something new from an alum and keep us informed, which is just really wonderful. So Facebook, Since so many of you are involved and have Facebook accounts, I feel almost embarrassed to even attempt to share any wisdom here, because I've been semi-stalking a few of your school's Facebook pages just to get a feel, and I think many of you have it down better than I do at the Bronfman Fellowships. But with that said, I'll share 5 tips that I think may be helpful here. A question that was asked a few times after the first webinar was whether alumni can be administrators of a Facebook page or group. And the answer is absolutely. Alumni can be. It can be wonderful to have an alum involved in that process, especially if they're energized and excited. But the caveat is it's essential that there's a staff member also administering an official page or group as well. So if you have a situation where you have an alum or alumni who have stepped up, great, but make sure there's a staff member involved, because Facebook, like anything else, it's organic, it's open-ended in many ways, but there still needs to be some strategy behind what you're putting up there or how you're thinking of what it will do for your community, which brings us to the next point. There's something called a Facebook page. There's something called a Facebook group. I laugh when I say it this way because I myself have taken a long time to get my head around it. But a page in many ways is your official profile. In some senses, it's your corporate face, although, again, I don't think of it in a corporate way. And a group is something where what you're hoping will happen is a lot of interaction and back and forth. No matter which you decide to have, and you may decide to have both, a page and a group, you need to have a real clear sense of the difference between the two for the sake of what you're going to do when engaging alumni on each of those. And in particular, a page, there's a bit less engagement in the sense that the metrics or the things you're going to see as success are going to be things like people clicking like to a photo that you've posted, or writing a 2-sentence response to an article that gets posted. You're not going to probably see the same level of back and forth conversation in some senses that a group may solicit. And again, depending on how you understand who your alumni are, which goes back to an earlier point in this webinar, that may be fine for you and probably is. When you are thinking about having an alumni group or an alumni page, the point is you want to make sure that the content is not just duplicating the content that you have for your school community or your current families and students. And if it's going to be a duplication and solely a duplication, it's probably not worth having a separate alumni-specific page or group. You can certainly invite your alumni to the page or group that's for the current school, but you probably won't expect the same level of engagement because the type of information you're posting, things like get your backpack and uniform, is not the type of thing that's interesting to alumni. So what is interesting to alumni? Well, it's important to have some fun with the content. Put some quotes up there, put some pictures, you know, put images of old awards or memorabilia, but not just the old. There's also a value in putting up new. And again, you know, the fact that there are iPads that every student or every classroom has, that's cool. That's actually interesting to alumni or to many alumni. So choose carefully what's the new information you want to share. Similarly, when I was looking at some of the pages that some of you manage or groups that some of you manage, in some cases, the intimacy of your community includes things like sending out a refuah shlema, sending out a hope that someone else is feeling better message, or noting when there's been a wonderful new birth or tragedy in the community. And in other cases, it's posting some interesting articles that may seem almost tangential to what your school is about, but that may seem very interesting and relevant to the age population you're trying to talk to in your community. And that is also very, very important to think carefully about that. And the last thing, and again, this is just from my own experience, but I have found, and I've been surprised by it consistently, and I'm not by any means that old myself, but a lot of the younger alumni that we interact with, when we try and reach them in their regular email, we don't always hear back. But a lot of times if we send them a message through their Facebook email, they respond a little bit quicker. And that's just something to keep in mind, especially going back to the question that was asked earlier about, you know, how do you stay in touch with students who graduate in 8th grade, for example. It's something that's helpful to note. So moving on to the next slide. Hold on. Another tactic and tool that's really of interest here is LinkedIn. LinkedIn, for a lot of reasons, I would say, is almost more important than a Facebook group. If one of the goals that you determine for your strategy around alumni engagement is to lead to networking amongst your alumni and to be relevant to their adult lives, then knowing what they're doing professionally at the moment and giving them a way to find one another without you as a professional having to always be the hub at the center who physically has to recommend connections and interactions. LinkedIn is a place where it really becomes a bit easier to do more of that connecting. You get to stay up to date on career changes. you can really get a better sense of the talent pool of your alumni, and that will help you with skill-based volunteer opportunities. If you're looking, I keep referring to technology, but if you're looking to do a technology upgrade, and you can go into LinkedIn and take a look at your LinkedIn group and find that there's a large portion of alums who are working in Silicon Valley, may you be so lucky, then that's kind of a neat way to say, hey, would you guys like to come back and be part of a set of advisory conversations as we're thinking about our technology upgrades? And there are other examples where that might work well. When you have a LinkedIn profile and group, make sure that you do have a professional look to that. Upload your logo, put your mission statement in. You can do a school profile, and that's really valuable. And don't forget, as many places as you can and want to promote your group, both your Facebook and your LinkedIn group, on your website, in newsletters, in email communications, in the signature box in each of your emails that goes out. The more that it's in front of members of your community, the more likely it is that word of mouth will get out and people will join. There's also ways to send out mass announcements to encourage people to join. There are ways to upload lists so that those individuals can be invited to your LinkedIn group. And so there are a lot of simple ways to reach people, and in some ways this could be your complete database, depending on what it is that you want from the data. So content creation. This is a really simple set of best practices related to communications in general. And when you're thinking about what you're communicating to your alumni, it's really important to think about targeted and curated communications rather than sending them everything that you create for your wider population of current students and families. The more that you have a calendar that's set out where you know what it is that you're trying to message and at what times of the year you want to message to your alumni, the easier it's going to be to stick to that and keep it simple. It doesn't need to be targeting a monthly outreach. People's lives are pretty busy. They don't notice. To some extent, they don't notice if it takes a few months before they hear from you again. The regularity is important, but the regularity doesn't need to be extreme frequency. And where you can, invite alumni to create some content, or if they've written articles or pieces, encourage them to share those, whether it's something that they share first through your Facebook group and you click a nice little like as the administrator, but then a few weeks later when you're putting together something that you're sending out to alumni, you ask if you have permission to republish it. Those are the kinds of things that show alumni that you recognize what they're bringing to the table, and also diversifies the type of content that you can then share with your alumni. When you are using when you are using communications, there are lots of different tools out there, mail and email and video. The Jewish Day School Video Academy is, I think, truly an amazing resource that you as professionals at a Jewish Day School can learn how to use video successfully. And really think about carefully when you're putting that calendar together, how do you mix it up so that it's not all just one style of communication. And graphics and format leave a real impression, so never skimp on that. It doesn't have to cost a lot, but create some uniform ways of what it looks like and then stick with it. We use MailChimp, which is a really simple system. There are other systems out there that are also very low-cost subscriptions online where you can then build a really nice-looking email communication or newsletter. And what's nice about something like MailChimp and some other systems out there too is that you can take a look at the stats at the end of it. You can see what links people click, you can see how sticky your subject line was, and you can keep refining your process for your content creation. So in our last 5 minutes, I am on to the final point around fundraising. And for many of you as professionals and a lot of you who are development professionals, this is one of the places that you spend a lot more of your time than I do, actually. But of course, as we said before, alumni engagement is not going to work if it's all about fundraising. But fundraising can be part of the process. And so when you're thinking about success, especially if you're talking about your younger alumni, and even alumni who have been out of touch, who you may have gotten back in touch with. Defining success by participation rather than dollars is one way to really both encourage alumni and help them see the goal as not just about who can write the biggest check, but also, again, going back to your stakeholders, it really gives your stakeholders a sense of what you're trying to achieve rather than how much you're bringing in. Where possible, if there are opportunities for alumni to own a specific project, something like a lot of schools, for example, have senior or 8th grade class gifts where the class fundraises so that it can buy a bench for the front of the school with a plaque or something that's tangible. For alumni fundraising, that model still very much fits. But now you may want to make it more fun and make it more interesting. You may, using social media, you may have a contest to identify both what people want to give to and help them see what the greatest needs of the school are at the moment. You may want to encourage certain populations. Maybe it's a group of 3 years that were all in middle school together in 1992 to work together to come up with a really great project that engages them with students who are currently in middle school at your school. Those are the kinds of things where it's achievable, it's clear, and there's a real buy-in, and people see where their dollars are going. For certain age demographics, competition can work. So especially for some of the younger ages, for them to see a goal of getting 50% of their class to donate or more and having class reps who can help you with that. It's very much similar to what a lot of the colleges do. It can be successful, especially at the early years where class connection and a sense of class unity is still more prevalent. And when you're talking about larger potential donors, what I would honestly say is use your standard development strategy as professionals, as development professionals. If you have a really tried and true way of building strong relationships before making a large ask, not much changes if they're an alum or if it's someone else that you're soliciting, as long as you have a lens to understanding what the school means to them as an alumnus. So with that, Mark, I'm going to hand it to you and say thank you to everybody. I am available for one-on-one consultations, as are professionals from See3 who are experts in social media and in communications and who can help you not only with video production, but with other aspects of your social media strategies through these consultations if you are a day school. And I am happy to work with you and talk to any of you about your alumni engagement strategy or any of the tactics that, that you are thinking about at the moment. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you, and thank you again for taking the time to share this lunchtime with me.
Thanks, Becky. There was actually one or two questions that I thought might be worth reviewing with the group. Sure. If we still have a minute. The first one, we're a K through 12 school and have lots of attrition, especially after 5th and 8th grade, when middle school and high school transitions. Should we still consider students who've left as valuable alums, and how do we balance the fact that they didn't stay with hopes that they still have good feelings for us?
That's great. So my honest answer is everyone is an alum if they opt into being an alum. So messaging to those individuals about how they can still be part of your school community and that they didn't abandon ship and that you don't regard them as that is actually really powerful. Many of them may want to stay connected. I've met a good number of students who loved their Jewish day school but wanted to go to a prep school for high school, for example, and were torn about that choice. And one of the things you want to do is keep that door open for them. But having said that, if you are going back to the first piece of targeting, if you are targeting alumni, it's not necessarily that population that is going to be your most engaged alumni. So essentially what I'm saying is that you want to keep the open door model for this population too, and in particular you want to think about the psychology of where they're coming from. Are they individuals that are going to feel the door is not open to them, and how can you change that mentality? But also your expectations of what it means for them to stay an alumnus may be a lot lower because their years with you are less. So that's what my thinking is there.
Great, thank you. There was one more question that I thought might be worth addressing with the group. I'm just trying to make sure I understand it. It came in two parts. At the start, you talked about reaching out to recent alums. How many years back constitute recent? And I think the context of this question was when you were talking about instead of trying to capture everyone, it might make sense to get more targeted.
Right. So recent alumni, in many ways, the way I would most think about it is alumni who are anywhere between 0 and 5 years out of your school. And also, I would think about it from another angle, which is people who are still young in their lives when it comes to how they understand what it means to be an alumnus. In a lot of senses, college is a place that shapes people's understanding of what an alumni network is. And for a lot of people today, aside from those, for the most part, who've gone to very elite prep schools, most of which are not Jewish prep schools, frankly, there isn't always a good understanding or model for what does it mean to be an alum until they get to college, and then they start to see the alumni reunions and the fundraising campaigns and the alumni magazines. And so what I think I would suggest here is that up until individuals are graduates of college, you have an opportunity to help them define what it means to be an alum in many very real ways. So even if someone's graduated in 6th grade from your school, there's an opportunity for them to see their role with your school as more than just a place that they went to school in 6th grade, but actually as a place where they are an alumnus, and you can help shape for them that definition. So as much as I would say 0 to 5 years has to do with just the proximity to the experience, and there's often an intensity that comes with that, the other facet there is up until recent college graduates, you have an opportunity there.
Great. Thank you very much. One more question came in that I think I can address. Yes, C3 is available for one-on-one consultations. As you can see in the closing slide, the website that holds all the information around this initiative is www.dayschoolvideoacademy.org. Now that these webinars are wrapping up, we have two big components that will still help everyone improve their online video and alumni outreach, and that is signing up for free one-on-one consultations. If you go to that URL and click on one-on-one consultations on the top of the left-hand side, you'll see that we have 5 different tracks that you can sign up for. You can schedule a time to talk to one of our experts and ask any questions you have about any of the 5 topics listed there. Also, the video contest is, so we are accepting submissions now. All the information you need is on the website. The deadline is October 31st. All submissions need to be under 2 minutes and need to involve the active participation of an alumni of your school. All the videos need to address the question, how did your day school education help make you the person and the Jew you are today? Tell us the story of the experiences and the people who inspired you. We provide suggested timelines, all sorts of storytelling, production, post-production, and distribution resources on the website. If you have any questions, our contact information is also on the website, and you can sign up for one-on-one consultations there as well. So I think that wraps it up. Becky, thank you so much for all of your help with this, and to everyone on the presentation, thank you for your active participation. I hope it was helpful. If you have any other questions, you can either post it to our Facebook group or contact us through the information on the website. Thank you very much.